From the city of brotherly love, this is Bite Biz with David Strausser.
You just arrived to the season 4 debut of Bite Biz. I'm your rock star wannabe host, David Strausser, and this is your place to learn how to grow a business during complete chaos. Today, we're going to chat software development. First, though, remember, please download the Bite Biz app if you're on Android at the Google Play Store, and that's where you can find every single episode of the show, whether you want the audio version, you want the video version, the Shark Bite clips, everything is right there. Plus, you can buy our fabulous coffee right in the app. But if you don't want to use the app, that's fine. You can still get the freshest coffee known on earth at deadhousecoffee.com. Just make sure you use the code SHARK and you're going to get 20% off your order, and we'll get all the proceeds to directly support us producing the biggest and best show we possibly can. Now let's get back to today's show. We're going to kick off season 4 with a great guest. Somebody who's going to tell you the difference between buy versus build when you need to invest into custom software development versus buying something that's already pre-built. So, who do we have today? Mr. Ryan Weiss. Ryan Weiss is the co-founder and CEO of Weiss Software, which provides cost-effective web development services. After gaining 20 years of experience in shipping software, 6 years in building high-velocity development teams, publishing 2 books, acting as lead architect for countless projects, and being awarded Microsoft's MVP award 3 times, Ryan decided to transfer his skills to an entrepreneurial space. So, hey, without further ado, let's bring Mr. Ryan Weiss right on in here.
Business strategy.
Ryan, welcome to Bite Biz. You, my friend, you just became Shark Bait.
Nice. Thanks for having me on, man.
Oh, no problem. So we have a tradition on the show. Very first question we ask every single person. What's your experience? What's your background? What do you do for a living? How'd you get there? Basically, in a nutshell, it's a loaded question, so watch out. What makes Ryan, Ryan?
Okay. Yeah. So essentially my essence is just that I'm a tinkerer and a computer geek. And I've been fortunate enough that those activities ended up being things that I could make a career out of as I got older. Some people, their hobbies and passions don't end up working out that way. So definitely just kind of on a very fortunate ride. I was raised overseas with my dad, who was a serial kind of wannabe and then decently successful entrepreneur. And so I kind of got a really...
Thank you for clarifying that, because serial, you hear the word serial and I'm thinking, okay, there's a couple different ways you could be a serial. Which direction are we going here?
Is it successful or not? Well, he was doing pitches at dinner. I call them dinner table pitches for most of my childhood. And then he finally had a business that became successful. And then that business ended, and it was successful enough that the people who were involved started kind of going after each other, and it kind of fell apart. And then after that, he had gotten such good experience. He finished his career as a corporate executive. But that had kind of planted the seed in me to starting a business one day. And then just with my career, like I said, with the tinkering, I'm always doing stuff on the weekends and stuff like that. When I became a programmer after college, I found myself, for one, I graduated into the recession, which caused me to get laid off quite a bit for the first 4 years. And then that made me really, really hungry to be one of the people who didn't get laid off. And what I noticed about those folks is that usually they were really good on the craft side, and then also had a really deep knowledge of the business side. And so I decided to focus on the craft side. And that got me to where I was kind of just making a lot of, having some, I guess, accomplishments, you might call them, around just getting involved with the community, which ended up leading to like me getting a few books book deals. And then I got some
That's
awards
cool.
from Microsoft for their MVP award, which is not as exclusive as it sounds, but it's hard to get. But like, there's probably a few hundred MVPs every year or whatever. And so I got that 3 times. And that led me to managing offshore teams, mostly in India for companies like Charles Schwab and Dell here in Austin. That was an extremely difficult thing to do well. And I had a few projects where I was doing that. And I just found it incredibly frustrating. If you've ever been on a support call with someone from India and the communication is hard and all that kind of stuff, then you would imagine working with 30 people and having to make a challenging project land well.
You know what I found with that? I lived down in Mexico for probably about 15 years. And I've noticed, and also I lived in Peru too. And I've worked with a lot of overseas people. And this isn't just for English. I think this is for any language, is that there's speaking the language, but then there's truly comprehending the language. So my experience, like if I was working with an Indian developer, let's just say, or even just down there in Mexico, when I was living down in Mexico, trying to do business in Mexico in Spanish, I spoke Spanish, but I really didn't fully comprehend the Spanish. And that's kind of what led, I think, to a lot of the frustration earlier in my career. And I see that a lot with offshoring as well too, with the language barriers. Yes, they speak English, but they don't really comprehend English to the level that we're comprehending it, to where it's almost like you're speaking 2 different languages. Do you agree, disagree with that?
No, that's definitely one of the hurdles. And then once you get past that hurdle, there's also some tremendous cultural differences. And as far as like values and things like that, like what I've noticed is with the Indian teams I've worked with, they have a much bigger eye on just making stuff work and not as much on like, is this the best possible way to do it? Now that's a generalization, but my business it benefits from the fact that I kind of understand the different markets and the attributes of them. And my partner is in New Delhi. And then on the US side of the fence, you find that you might have people sitting around for months deciding, was that the best approach? And just kind of, spending a lot of time on the kind of creative side of it. And what my partner and I, what we saw as a huge opportunity is like, wow, what if you combine those 2 worlds? And then you've got where you're spending the time you need to make sure it's done well, but also getting it done on time and, with high speed. And so Prashant and I, basically, that's my partner in New Delhi. When we worked together, that was the setup that we got there. So I live here in Austin, which is a progressive town for technology. I spend a lot of time in the community, talking at conferences and, sharing notes and all that kind of stuff. So I stay right up on top of the bleeding edge. And then I'm able to distill that stuff down, pull out the stuff that aligns with our company's values. And we've been able to create a company that focuses on our motto is affordable, predictable development. And that's actually, it sounds like super obvious and simple. Like, yeah, everybody would want to do that. But we found not a lot of people do that because it's really difficult to do. That's why all of the large companies were hiring me to set up these teams offshore from India, is because if you do it right, there's some really attractive attributes to it. We basically have built more of a software factory and less of a blacksmith warehouse where everyone's just banging on metal until it looks like a sword. And kind of, there's a little difference in how everyone's doing the work. We approach it differently. And as that analogy, if you follow it through, you would see why you would prefer the one to the other. Sometimes you want a really nice, custom piece that shows the work of the craftsman. A lot of times you just want something that does what it does predictably and is affordable, So we're on that side.
Right. Like an MVP, like a minimal viable product, which is such a buzzword these days.
Yeah. And so that's one of our 4 pillars. We say that there's 4 pillars to making our affordable, predictable model work. And it's being smart about teams, tools, process, and features. And so the feature part is talking about making sure that folks, I always use analogies to talk about software. And the custom home building analogy is really good for custom software. And if you've ever watched the shows where, people are shopping for real estate, and they're always like, okay, this is all the stuff we have to have, and they're like, all right, fine. And they show them the house and it's like 3 times their budget, and they're like, okay, well, maybe we can be a little further from downtown. And it's the same thing with software. When you talk to folks, and before they've actually seen how expensive it is and how hard it is, they'll have a really expensive wish list of things. And so part of our journey with folks is to kind of sit them down and say, look, let's just create a prioritization of the features you need, and we'll put your budget over that, and then you can get exactly what you need. Because
Right.
you're building a 747, but you're just driving to the corner store.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I mean, a good example of what you're saying is my day job. I do with Vision 33. We do ERP for small to mid-sized businesses with SAP Business One and Sage Intacct. And that is probably one of the biggest things that we see as well, too, to where it's like they want everything. They want it all. They want it the most complex. They want their whole wish list. And it's like, no, 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 no. We can do that. Okay. But you got to remember, doing an ERP implementation is kind of like a full body transplant. And you have a business to run as well as implement and learn this new software solution. So while we technically could, you're probably going to be overwhelmed. So what we try to do is we try to do more of a phased approach. What do you actually need to be running with on the software day one for go live? And then from there, once you're stable, everybody gets it. They're a little bit quicker doing their transactions. Then we have a solid foundation to build off of to start to get some of those wish list items done. Sounds like you have kind of the same philosophy.
absolutely. Like we always want folks to, let's get $1 of revenue or a user active on the system before we get too ambitious with the feature set. So let's just make sure that people are actually going to use it, that they're actually going to spend money on it. And then we'll start adding all of these, things that are differentiators.
How important is it then for you as far as speed, like the speed of going live and getting them in using their solution as quick as possible versus giving them the wish list? My experience is the longer that something drags on, the longer it is for a company to feel that ROI, the harder it's going to get to ultimately get and keep that customer happy long term.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few different folks that you're going to have to keep interested, and the stakeholders are going to be one, the folks who are paying the bills. So we like to show working software and deployed environments within a week of when we start. And
Wow.
then we agile processes. And so that first working piece of software is going to be pretty simple. Maybe it just shows a customer list or a list of projects or something like that. But it'll look like what the final product's supposed to look like, and it'll be out deployed in the real world. If you are hiring teams to do things for you, that would be probably my number one thing that I would say you have to insist on, because what happens is folks will, there's a lot of things about our industry, my industry, our industry, whatever, that embarrasses me as far as the software consulting. And one is where folks will get in there and they'll be billing people for 3 months, 4 months, whatever. And the people who have signed contracts with them, they feel like the contracts are protecting them. And they're like, oh, okay, these people are guaranteeing, we're just giving them 25% up front, and then we don't have to pay the rest until this happens, until that happens. Well, a lot of times that 50% or whatever that you pay before you get to the end of the project will cover a lot of their costs. And they'll just get 3-4 months out, and they try to put the system out and deploy it. And then that just drags on, and there's bugs and there's issues and all this kind of stuff. And by the time you tap out, you're 4 months out or whatever. And most likely you'll go to another agency and they won't take over that code. People seem to think the software is an asset like everything else. But it's not. It's most of the time a liability unless you work with a firm.
I just had that same exact discussion, and they're like, hey, look, we're having this one company do an integration for us, and we want you guys to add onto it. And it's kind of like, we don't really know their code, and it might not be to the best practices as far as our standards and how we do it. And it's going to cost you a lot more time, money, and frustration for us to get in there and add these things on more than likely than it would be just for you to pay
Rewrite it.
them to finish it out.
Yeah. That the rewrite thing is a big factor. And so I define the asset value of software as being how likely and easy it is for another team to take over. So we start all of our projects with we have some boilerplates on our website on GitHub that are you can get to on our website and things like that.
Right.
And those are basically describe how to start the application, how to deploy the application. It even talks about the goals of the architecture.
Right.
We have a section on goals and values. And the reason we do that is because whenever you get in with another team, there's developers, you may have seen this, you may not have seen it, but they tend to have a tendency to argue about pedantic things,
Yeah.
tab spaces and all this kind of stuff. And the analysis paralysis is very expensive for stakeholders. And like I said, we try to focus on affordable and predictable delivery. And so if we start with these are our values, these are our goals, we want to be able to deploy fast. We want to have high developer ergonomics, et cetera. And if you can get people to agree to goals and values a lot more easily than you can to patterns and architectures and techniques. And so if we have that and everyone agrees these are the patterns, then once you get outside of that 20 that gets you 80 that we always clearly define in our README, when you get into some architectural conversations, they go much quicker because you can say, well, that one we can't use because it doesn't satisfy this one goal that we all agreed on.
Right.
And I mean, right. I know that sounds really kind of like, I don't know, is it passive aggressive? I don't know what the right word is. but like, it's really, I feel like it really helps our projects a lot, and it just really
that's good.
I agree too,
Yeah, no, it's good. That's solid info. So let's talk about buy versus build. When is it a good time to invest in custom software development?
So this is a really interesting thing I've been focusing on lately. I got invited to the Forbes Council, and my first article I'm publishing for them is going to be on this topic. I feel like every single business owner and every executive in a larger company, this is one of the key things that they have to think about with technology. There's no way that you can have a company without technology, as we all know.
Right.
And so one of the key things as a decision maker, you're going to have to decide is whether or not we take something off the shelf to solve this particular problem in our business, or we build something custom. And so just like with a custom home, going back to that, it's the same kind of trade-offs, right? So if, say it wasn't a custom home, say it's a shed, right? Everyone has a shed. You know how a shed works. You buy a shed because like that's a very common thing, and there's a lot of good options out there off the shelf. So in your business,
right. It's like, why reinvent the wheel when you're talking about something like a shed?
It's not the most important part of your home. And when you talk to business owners or you talk to stakeholders and larger companies or executives, and you ask them, what does your business do? The good business leaders all have their pitch down, right? And it's around their differentiators. Most likely your differentiators is where you're going to find opportunities to kind of have a competitive advantage with a custom system. When it comes to things that aren't differentiators, like paying invoices, communications with your team, managing your taxes, all that kind of stuff that every other business out there does, there's going to be, I could throw a rock and probably hit a software company in Austin that has a SaaS product that does that, So, you're going to have a lot to choose from. You'd be crazy to do a custom invoicing system unless your invoicing is very complex. Maybe you're a concrete company and it goes into all these calculations around how you're pouring or whatever.
And that's where, like, from my perspective, being with what we do, that's where, I mean, those solutions are already built. I mean, even if you're that concrete company, like you're saying, between either SAP or Sage, one of those two solutions, is it going to take some tailorization? Yes, because the parameters of how you can tailorize a software very robust, okay? But you're not actually going in there and doing a hard customization on the code. You're using the software within its, within the features that are already there. You're just putting those workflows in place for your specific business practices.
Right. And so some examples that to codify it, there's a company here in Austin that or powder coats logos onto Yetis. Like in Texas, Yetis are super popular. So all the other software in the company, you probably could get off the shelf. But when it comes to creating an interesting shopping experience for folks, for doing that customization, that's probably going to be something that a custom system would help with. Or like when it comes to your manufacturing piece, you probably would want some custom software in that piece as well, depending on what you're doing there. And then another company.
It all depends on what your secret sauce is.
Exactly.
The secret sauce to your business. I mean, we run into that too, and it's like, hey, when we go out and do a blueprint, and for people that don't know what a blueprint is, when in the ERP world, that's a business process workflow where we'll go out there and we'll document every business process you have, and then we'll translate that into best practices, trying to automate as much as we can that makes sense for the original phase one. Now, when we give that document to some customers, they might push back like, hey, like, yeah, I guess this technically is a best practice, but that kind of spoils our secret sauce. We think that this is part of the magic of what makes our business happen, and we have to keep this way or adjust this to maximize it in a different avenue. And then, we make those accommodations.
Absolutely. And another one, though, we've seen sometimes the off-the-shelf products in the space can be cost prohibitive, or you could outgrow them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like we'll often tell folks we use a lot of SaaS offerings. So for example, like with AWS, if you're hosting your code on AWS, we lean towards more platform as a service type offerings where you just say, this is a website and you stick it up there and they take care of all the details, and it'll just scale up and scale down on its own. And you don't have to worry about all the details. Well, if your business takes off and all of a sudden you've got 50,000 active customers at all time, your bill is going to go really high.
Yeah.
And then that's where if you have some really fine-tuned DevOps come in and kind of like containerize the whole thing and, use like these spot instances that are cheaper and wake them up. And there's all kinds of stuff you can do. You'll find that you have the volume to support it and you get economies of scale on that effort now. Whereas, so that's another inflection point is kind of to scale, right? You might look for
right. No, totally great info right now. So one of the things that I always talk about, and I've talked about it on this show, but I also talk about it every day whenever one of my sales reps has a prospect, I tell them the same thing. There's two ingredients for a successful go live for your business. The first one is the software solution. You have to have the right solution, because if you pick the bad solution, doesn't matter who's implementing it, you're still going to have a failed product. You're going to have a failed go live. The second one is the actual partner, the people who are implementing it. If you don't have the right team implementing your software, you're going to have a failed go live, just as if you picked the wrong solution. I think both keys are critical. I'd love to hear from you about your 5 red flags to watch out for when hiring a software development agency.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'll remember all 5 off the top of my head, but I definitely like to share that notes with folks. Generally speaking, the main theme is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And so one of the things we always warn folks to look out for, don't feel comfortable that the contracts are going to save you. So if people are giving you like these money back guarantee type scenarios, like, oh, there's no risk, they're not being respectful of your budget, because, there's always going to be some kind of risk there. And, the thing is, if you get locked in, what the agencies know is that once you start doing work with them, it's extremely expensive to switch teams, right? So, so they're going to get you in there, and when it comes to, we'll give you your money back and all that kind of stuff. Most likely, by the time you get to that point, you're going to have paid 50% of the project or something like that. And a lot of companies just operate under a model where they'll get that far with it and then they abandon the project, just like if you're doing construction or consulting at your house. So that's one thing to look out for. Too good to be true estimates,
Yeah.
when you're shopping. If an estimate is the cheapest and it also has the least amount of details, it's not a real estimate, right?
Right.
If you're going to see
It's just a sales number.
it's just like, hey, whatever, we know this
Yeah.
is going to flow. Maybe this will stick. When a real estimate, in my opinion, or one that I would feel comfortable paying, there's lots of agencies out there that we have one that we think operates similar to us called Full Stack Labs. If you go on their website, they show their examples of their estimates. If you see examples of our estimates, they're incredibly detailed. They have lots of line items on them that talk about every single piece of the project, and none of the line items are terribly big. There's paddings for known unknowns, but not like just crazy paddings,
Mhm.
and the paddings make sense, and they talk to a mature process. And most importantly, like when they take you through it, you can tell like, wow, these guys have really spent some time figuring this stuff out.
Oh yeah.
They definitely take it serious.
I totally agree with that. Our statement of work, same exact thing, to where it lists out every area of the
Yeah.
system, what's included, what's in scope, what's out of scope, what's the limitations of what's in scope. And that's kind of how we build ours. Now, our sales reps, God love them, they hate it oftentimes because that's like, oh, you're giving them a shopping list. Then they're going to be like, oh, well, why is that out of scope? Well, because they wanted to be at this budget. And realistically, like for example, MRP is something, material resource planning, that we'll hear, oh, why is that not in scope for Well, it's a brand new system. I mean, you don't have the data in the system to support, to be able, the historical data usually, to do that right out of the gate. 6 months down the road, yeah, you should start having enough data to where you can do some real MRP planning and stuff like that. So there's some explanations like that we go through. But having a very detailed, structured, I think, statement of work, ultimately, it shows that the company that is looking at your project actually understands your business and the scope of work that they're about to perform.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And then other things I'd say you would want to watch out for is, you should see an awful lot of process. You don't want lean processes, most likely, depending
Yeah.
on what you're building. I mean, if you're trying to build the next spaceship for a billionaire, maybe not, but like for most,
A
most,
lot of that's going on right now.
yeah, there's a lot of that. If you're one of the guys who gets that project, you probably have a pretty detailed process. But a big part of our sales cycle is taking folks through our full life cycle from napkin to revenue process. And this is what each stage looks like. This is about how long that stuff takes, et cetera. And then I would also expect that if you're going to see numbers, you shouldn't see the real numbers until people have worked on it for a minute. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get real numbers. Like, we give really wild estimates on the first call. We'll say, 4 to 6 months, maybe, and so we can give you kind of a rough ballpark on that first call, just so we're respectful of people's time and they're respectful of ours if we're not even talking the same language. Some people think a custom system's $1,500, but
you got to make sure you're in the same ballpark, basically.
Exactly.
And that's same thing. It's like if I hear on a phone call that you have XXXX, we've done enough of those projects. This is what you should be at. But until we really peel back the layers of the onion, it's really hard to give a firm number. Usually once we do the blueprinting, though, we have that whole business process analysis. That is the instruction manual, and it's got, a little bit of buffer into it, like you said, but that's usually where you're going to get more fine tuned. And unless you forgot to tell us that you have a strawberry farm and you expect us now to implement the strawberry farm, you shouldn't get any change orders because we've really peeled back all the layers. And, it should be pretty solid, I think, by that point going forward.
Yeah, I don't see how you can do it without discovery. And I have a clickbait article called it's on Medium, The Secret to Successful Software Estimation is in a dirty word, ... And then the dirty word is waterfall. You have to you're doing some flavor of waterfall when you're doing discovery and upfront planning. But for SOW type projects, which I think are appropriate when you're first building a relationship with, you might get into a partnership, but we always like to start with the SOW so we can prove our value, with some guardrails.
Right.
And I think that's the right way to go with it, and what I've seen and a few firms I've worked with and stuff like that do this. When you get through with the discovery, what I think is really nice to see is that every line item, we will actually put it into Jira or whatever your process management tool you're using. And I've seen other agencies do that where they actually have links to the items in the estimate. And then you just tag those as MVP, right? And then that makes it super easy to understand your change request flow, because anything that gets added to the system and doesn't have the MVP tag, okay, that's new stuff. And so what we do is we feel that discovery allows us.
Scope creep is so hard to manage, especially what drives me nuts is that sometimes with these projects, I mean, you like to have the executives and all the principal people involved, but for whatever reason, sometimes it just doesn't work out like that. You always have that person that shows up at the end and they're like, oh, what about me? And then, and they want to throw this or that in. And it's such a pain in the butt. But I mean, we have ways that we kind of, mitigate that during our process. And I'm sure you do as well too, right?
Yeah, we've learned the lesson that we've had where we built the system and then they are like, okay, this is the person who's going to use it. And we're like, wait, none of y'all were the ones that were going to use it. And they come in and they're like, this totally isn't going to work. And we're like, wait a minute. How could y'all not because we went through the whole process assuming that, this person here was going to be using the system, but it turns out they had someone else. So we usually, lesson learned on that. We always make sure that we're talking to the actual users.
The users, the stakeholders, everybody involved.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the folks who are managing the users think they know what the system's going to do. But then as soon as the users get it, they're like, wait a minute, how am I going to do X, Y, Z? How would that even work? And everyone's just like, well, I don't know.
The frontline workers need to be involved to a degree. I don't think you need them actually dictating every part of the system, but they do need to have at least at the lower level manager level. Like, for example,
I need to give a thumbs up on it.
Right. You don't need the person who's actually going to be picking and packing orders in a warehouse to be validating that, but maybe that warehouse manager that knows what his or her team actually does. That's the type of person that you would want involved to make sure that it's being set up to work for their team.
Yeah, I would probably in that scenario want to get at least one of those folks to try it early and review the wireframes and try it early in the process. Sometimes you even just get into who moved my cheese, which maybe it doesn't matter, but maybe it might not matter. It might matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've seen really, really good designs go wrong. Quick anecdote on that. I worked for a company that was building as a consultant that was building a seismic system where you have these devices in the ground and you create this grid and you blow up things and you read underneath. So they decided to come out with a wireless system. And so that all this research and development, years of work went into creating this wireless system. They got the wireless system out in the field and the guys were like, man, these things are really hard to find. I mean, we have bushes and snow and all this kind of stuff. And so they ended up tying ropes from each of the devices back to each other. And then it was very obvious that the wireless system was completely unnecessary because at the end of the day, the guys in the field needed the devices to be connected just as a practical matter of how they do their work, And so that's a disconnect. Very expensive mistake where if they just talk to the guys in the field.
It could have easily been resolved. So we have time for about one more question. And, I think this goes to the heart of what your business is, what your business does. And, I'd really like to hear it from you as far as hiring a software development company, okay, whether you're going onshore or offshore, what is what's the best solution and what works for most companies?
Sure. So, like most things in software, the best answer is always it depends.
Hmm.
And so I would say again back to if you're trying to get the SpaceX rocket not to blow up the next time it lands on the launch pad, that's probably a different team than if you're building another forms over data application.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think depending on the level of innovation that's involved, you can kind of figure out what kind of team you need. You might not need everyone on your team to be wearing a cape and a superhero developer,
Right.
um, if you're doing. And so what we've optimized on is taking the folks that are wearing the capes and spreading those across a lot of projects, and then taking all that knowledge and, like I said, creating a factory approach that allows us to create affordable, predictable solutions for a lot of projects. If you're building an app that does things that are similar to things that have already been done out there, it's a great approach. Now, on the other hand, my Mercedes SUV that we got this year has all kinds of technology in the dash cam that was not built with a team like what we created, because it's incredibly innovative computer vision type stuff.
Right.
The GPS system in there is really, really clever. It can tell when you have a trailer hitch in, and when it does, it shows a different display, and that display does all kinds of cool stuff. You probably want a very different team for something like that. So I think the main factor is figuring out where you are on the innovation curve, and what your budget looks like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Hey, this has been a pretty fun, informative conversation. You enjoying it so far?
Absolutely, man. I like a few podcasts, and I love the energy on this. And like we were talking before, I love that Marilyn Manson's in the background there. That's
Oh yeah. Yeah. Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie, Saint Nick Foles. We got Aerosmith. We got everybody back there. You should see the other wall. I got Billy Bob Thornton. I got Steven Tyler, Joe Perry. I have so much rock memorabilia. I don't even have places to put it anymore. It's crazy. But hey, last question for you, Ryan. How can people find you? How can they digitally stalk you online?
For stalking, I'm not super sure, but the easiest way to get in touch with me is to go to our website, vitesoftware.com. And there's a little pop-up that is a robot, but the robot will connect you with me. If I'm available, it'll come straight to my phone and I can reply right then. If I'm not available, it'll allow you to schedule a call. And that's the easiest way to get in touch with me. I am on Twitter, but not very active. So really that's the best way.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed being Shark Bait, and definitely looking forward to getting you back on in the future as we progress through this pandemic that doesn't end.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I really appreciate you having me on, David. It's a really fun show. So thanks for the invite. Cheers.
Wow, such an awesome chat with Ryan, right? First, you all know the routine. If you found this interview helpful, if it sparked those warm and fuzzies, do me a favor. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. But if you really want to help us out, please share us out to your network, your colleagues, your friends, your family. Get us out there wherever you dwell on the interwebs, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere out there in the web. Please share us out there. Help people discover Ryan Weiss and his amazing company. Now let's get back to our rock star guest, Ryan, okay? This is an ever important episode, and the interview we had today, I think, was really kind of critical. Companies are shorthanded. They are ever more having to reach into the hands of custom development to fill the gaps left behind by inflated pricing and the difficulty of hiring people to fill gaps. They're looking for software, for technology to fill those gaps in the company so that they can continue to operate. One of the biggest things I think, and I believe, is how to make the software development process more predictable and affordable. And that was one of Ryan's main talking points. That's something that really resonates with me. I work in ERP world. You all know that by now. I deal with SAP and Sage products mostly, but what I do does fall in line with what Ryan was discussing. There are things that you can do to easily help mitigate the cost of your software project, whether custom development or even rolling out an ERP like our business does. Know what you want, know your pain points, and make sure that the company you're working with has a tried, tested, and true methodology. Don't be the guinea pig. Most people, I think, well, not most people, but most importantly, I think scope creep is one of the biggest areas that makes a successful deployment, okay? Well, scope creep is one of the things that makes a successful deployment difficult because people end up adding things into the product at a later stage after you've already went through and did your design documents, your business process review, your blueprint, or whatever it may be. So you really need to differentiate between the needs versus desires. Push the desires off and keep it to the needs for your initial rollout. The old adage, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, rings so true with software. Get up, get running, and get live as quick as possible so that you can get an ROI. You can usually, 99% of the time, whatever you're building, again, custom software development like Ryan does, ERP like we do, these platforms are usually meant to be built off of. You can continue adding to them as time goes on. You don't need everything, every bell, every whistle for that initial go live. Separate it, get that ROI, and then continue developing off of that. Awesome stuff, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on and telling your story to us. Please, people, go out there, check out the Vice Software LLC. Ryan, obviously, he's a dude. He knows his stuff. Great person, great interview. Thank you again. So gracious for him coming on. Question of the day. Where do you draw the line between buy versus build? Let us know in the comments down below. Do you want to be on the show? If so, send out an email, interviews@sharkbitebiz.com. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that little join button. You can become a baby shark and support the channel for $3 a month. If not, understand money through big tech isn't a big popular thing. Just head on over to deadhousecoffee.com. Okay, you're going to get the freshest coffee that is roasted, sealed, and shipped within a 24-hour period to your doorstep. You get 20% off if you use the code SHARK. We'll get all the proceeds to continue growing this channel. You all know this by now, but I'll say it once again. I'm David Strasser. This is Shark Bite Biz. We'll see you all next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Shark Bite Biz. We hope you got some insightful info from this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and visit us on the web at www.sharkbitebiz.com. How has business changed for you in the 20s? Email us at podcast@sharkbitebiz.com so you can join us and share your story.